today. Eric Miller will be replacing Terry Stigton with the DCS. And then we have Dr. Lindsay Weaver, who is replacing Dr. Box. Would you like to introduce yourself? Sure.
Can you hear me or do I need to vote? Okay. Okay.
About a 2-inch mic.
About 2-inch. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Lindsay Weaver. I am the new State Health Commissioner. Dr. Box retired. We are having a celebration for her tomorrow, though, from 2 to 4 here. If you guys would like to attend. I've been the Chief Medical Officer at the Department of Health since February of 2020. So trial by fire for me. So thankfully not new to the State Department of Health, and I'm an emergency medicine physician by training. I still work in the ER every Tuesday at Methodist here downtown. I am the mother of 5 beautiful daughters, and I'm really excited about being able to participate on this commission. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and start with line item number 2, and that's a consent on the agenda. Does anyone have any corrections or additions to the April meetings? Seeing none, I just asked for consent. Is everyone in favor? Thank you. Anyone opposed? All right. And that's going to take us into our first presentation, which I believe will be Zoom with Justice David David. Blaine. Is Justice David on?
Good morning.
There it is.
Good morning.
Morning.
How's that for timing? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I told Mark I would try to get on about 10:01, 10:02. We weren't sure what time you would want me. So I appreciate taking me out of order if that's what you're doing. But I am very, 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 very pleased to report that you all will be seeing the report of the Indiana Youth Justice Oversight Committee very, very soon. As you know, we have our deadline of the end of this month to submit that pursuant to House Enrolled Act 1359, and we will meet that deadline. We had our last meeting of the Oversight Committee at the previous meeting. I think in advance of that was my last report to you. And we had, I think, 72 recommendations coming from the various work groups that we were addressing. We carried over several of those, probably 6 or 7 of the 72 to our last meeting, and worked through all of those recommendations. So all of the recommendations that were ultimately brought before the Indiana Youth Justice Oversight Committee, some of them as amended, were all passed. I'm pleased to report that most of them were passed unanimously, but that represents the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of work done by not just the Oversight Committee itself, but by the work groups, the 7 work groups, data, transitional services, diversion, behavioral health, screening and assessment, grants process, juvenile probation standards, and an 8th group that is not really called and was not really called a work group, but a critical component was the Youth and Family Advisory Committee. And Akia put this together, and those young people's perspectives, their experiences, their sincerity and honesty, coupled with the appreciation and the work that the work groups did to engage with the Youth and Family Advisory Committee to get real honest feedback on specific recommendations that they were working on. So to see that work, quite frankly, I was a little concerned about that. Being an old adult, that number one, we might not appreciate what they had to offer and may not do the best job of conveying, translating, communicating what we were thinking to them, or maybe we weren't quite ready to do that. So kudos to our work group and our work group chairs and to Kia and her team. And then I thought perhaps, okay, since I'm a worrier genetically, I would worry about what the reaction would be, or maybe would the young people take this seriously, or appreciate the opportunity that they had to engage with individuals who are going to make specific recommendations that could be profoundly impactful going forward. Well, again, Kia and her team did an absolutely marvelous job of preparing the young people, not preparing them in a sense of this is what you will do, but preparing them in a critical sense of understanding what we were trying to do and how great of an opportunity they had to participate and provide feedback. So those young people went through significant process of getting them ready, and they were nothing short of extraordinary. We had the privilege of having several of those young people that have gone through the system appear and speak to the oversight committee, as well as having Kia's report that is an attachment to, will be an attachment to, a part of our final report, but also the work group report back, the chairs sharing their experience when their work group met with the Youth and Family Advisory Committee. So just tremendous. We're very, very pleased with the recommendations that are coming your way and coming the legislators' way and coming the court's way. I think the big takeaways, if I can, if you want some teasers and then I'll answer any questions, is that obviously the Youth Justice Oversight Committee will continue. How exactly that continues and what that looks like is still in the process of being worked out. Indiana Office of Court Services, IOCS, will play a critical role in implementing or ensuring that the necessary education, messaging, resourcing, making sure that we can do what we need to do and what we want done. Certainly, the commission, your work is not done, and you are playing and will play an integral role in that. I can best describe what has happened over the last year plus is as nothing short of extraordinary. It is a textbook example of how collaboration, consensus building, communication, listening, paying attention to what people are saying, even if you don't agree with them. And, you know, the genesis of this obviously was the legislative desire to help augment, help supercharge what we are already doing in Indiana with respect to our young people. Some great work being done by JDAI, great work being done by individual counties. But this is an opportunity to force multiply all of that work. And there are a number of recommendations with respect to data. I think the recurring theme in our recommendations is you've got to walk before you can run. I've tried to temper the excitement that we have with the work that was done, with the understanding that, look, we are not going to be able to deliver a thumb drive, right? That every probation officer, every judicial officer, every county can just plug into its mainframe and suddenly have the answers to all of our lingering challenges, that this is a process. This is a marathon. Hopefully what we have put together will be an excellent roadmap, but it is a roadmap. The details will need to be filled in, and it is imperative that your commission, the chair of Youth Justice Oversight Committee, work hand in hand with the legislature and with obviously the Chief Justice and the courts of Indiana. We understand that the success in this area is dependent upon judicial officers and probation officers being fully invested and engaged. They are critical, but they can't do it alone. Everyone else that has been involved, including you, has to be on board. But it's a challenge, but I think it's an opportunity that everyone's excited about. Many people on the Youth Justice Oversight Committee have said, put me in, coach. I'll stay on board. Whatever you want me to do, I'm all in. So I think that's important to understand. But I really think what we've done, again, we collectively, because you all have been a part of this, many of you have really been a part of it. But it is a template, a role model that we should be very proud of, and Indiana should be very proud of. We've done this the Indiana way, and I'm very proud of that. So you'll be seeing that report shortly after the end of the month. I will have a cover letter, sort of a stay tuned, and some insights that I wanted to share. Excuse me. The report will have a executive summary, so it'll be a little bit easier to digest initially, and then we'll have as appendices to that report the actual report of all of the work groups. Senator Kreider and Representative McNamara zoomed in on our last meeting and expressed their most sincere appreciation to all of the efforts and all the individuals who volunteered so much time. I can't compliment Mark enough for his leadership and his willingness to dive into this new role not wade into it, dive in the deep end, with maybe a couple of weights on his legs, because it was an immersion, immediate immersion, and he's been a great partner, and I will miss that relationship with him. Indiana Office of Court Services and their professional staff have really stepped up to the challenge. So I'm honored to have served the state of Indiana in this capacity, and be happy to answer any questions that you all might have at this time.
Thank you very much for that overview. I'm really looking forward to the report. Does anyone have any questions? I guess you're off the hook, Judge.
Wow. Well, again, thank you all for all that you do. All of us in this business like to say that Indiana's children make up less than 25% of the population of Indiana, but 100% of the future. And looking around from my vantage point, all of you in that room, each of you have made many contributions, and most all of you made significantly more contributions to this than this whole entire effort than I have. But I ran for judge in 1994 because I wanted to be the circuit court judge, because I wanted to have the juvenile jurisdiction, because I wanted to make a difference. You fast forward 29 years later, I'm not sure how successful I've been, but it's been a great ride, and I'm proud to have served with many of you, and I'm proud to have served all of you. So that's all I have. If you have any subsequent questions, once you see the report, reach out to me. My retirement lasted 6 months. I'm a failure as a retiree. So I'm back to the part-time practice of law and the part-time senior judging and trying to develop a mediation practice. So much for retirement, but maybe next time. Thank you all. Thank you, Mark, for all the assistance you've provided. It's been a great relationship, and hope to see more of you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for all the work that you've done, you and your force. Okay, moving on to number 4, and this is a data presentation from the Indiana Youth Institute with Mark. I believe you are or are not going to add in a little bit of the strategic plan. So.
Yeah, IY is going to run through and integrate some of our strategic plan goals as they talk, but feel free to make that time to pause and ask questions on some of our integration points and how we can be using this data.
Well, good morning to you all. My name is Taylor Johnson. I am the Policy and Data Advocacy Manager at the Indiana Youth Institute. And on behalf of our entire organization and our President and CEO, who is here with us this morning, as well as my boss, the Vice President of Data and Communications, we're going to take a moment and just say thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to present this data, to talk with you. And please know how deeply we value the relationship of continually working to improve the lives of children all throughout the state of Indiana. We share a similar mission, and so we appreciate the opportunity to take time this morning to go over some of the data as we look at what our children here in Indiana are experiencing. So, do I have clicker access? Is it the left or the right button? Where am I? I do not have, which is clicker power. All right, let me see if that. All right, now I think I've got it. Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, so as I mentioned, to best serve our kids here in Indiana, I think it's important for us to really know who they are. And the judge kind of touched on this, but Indiana is home to the 14th largest child population in the nation. There's more than 1.59 million children in the state of Indiana younger than the age of 18. And those colored boxes there on the right side of the screen indicate the racial and ethnic breakdown of our child population. You see that our child population is actually more diverse than our adult population. Over 35% of our children identify as a race or ethnicity other than white, and that's compared to around 25% of our adult population. So 35% compared to 25%. We see that our child population is much more diverse than our adult population. And the judge actually took a line right out of my notes and a line that I've heard our president and CEO say many times. They make up 23.6% of our total population. But it is true that they make up 100% of our future leaders, our workforce, our community members. And so it's important for us to always continually be looking for ways and opportunities to support their growth and their development and their well-being. And when it comes to well-being, the Annie E. Casey Foundation actually provides rankings that help us gauge how our kids in every state, but particularly here in Indiana, are doing. And these are actually just released. So for in 2023, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, in comparison to all other states in the United States, gave Indiana a ranking of overall child well-being as 24th. This is actually an improvement, but you see the 4 domains immediately below that. You see family and community, which is our lowest performing domain at 31st. Health at 29th, economic well-being at 16th, and education at 13th. Now, this is in comparison to how other states are doing. This is not a historical look back, but we do have a historical look back. And you see that in 2023, our overall ranking actually improved compared to the previous 6 years of these rankings. Historically, we've been around 28th, 29th. So 24th is an improvement for us. As we look at our own rankings. Again, these rankings are compared to the states nationally. So of the domains, we're going to go through each one, and I'm going to pause and kind of tie that back into the strategic plan points that Mark has outlined for us. So we're going to start with family and community. Now, you see there on the screen the rankings that Annie E. Casey Foundation uses to provide this family and community ranking. And one of the data points that the IYI tracks that falls in this family and community domain is ACEs. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with ACEs, but just as a brief kind of high-level recap, ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, which are stressful and traumatic events that occur during childhood. They highlight the potential impacts of abuse and neglect and household dysfunction. And the original CDC Kaiser Permanente study identified an association between childhood trauma, so through the occurrence of ACEs, and negative later life outcomes. And these later life outcomes include poorer health, like obesity, diabetes, depression, suicidal ideation, STDs, heart disease, and stroke. They also increase the risk of certain risk behaviors like smoking, alcoholism, and substance use. We see decreased life opportunities for children who experience numerous ACEs, like academic achievement. And it also produces the onset, in many cases, of toxic stress, which can impact the child's body and their brain, and also produce similar those negative outcomes that I just mentioned. We also know that ACEs are often compounding in nature. And so if a child experiences 4 or more ACEs, they are at much higher risk of experiencing those negative outcomes as compared to a child that experienced 1 or 2. So what does that look like when we look at children who've experienced ACEs here in Indiana? Well, we see that here in Indiana, 1 for every 5 Hoosier children, 2 have experienced at least 1 adverse experience. So we know that that's a pretty common thing. The experience of 1 adverse effect is not necessarily a heightened risk factor for them. And the 2 children, 1 has been faced with multiple compounding traumatic events. So of the 5, 1 has been faced with 2 has experienced 1 adverse effect. And of those 2, 1 has had multiple compounding traumatic events. That's actually one of the highest occurrence rates in the Midwest. Now, there's a lot of text on this slide, but I know that you have the slide deck in front of you. Now, compared to our peers nationally, Hoosier youth have a higher prevalence across all 9 ACEs as measured by the National Survey of Children's Health. And this is a parent-reported survey, which is different than what I'm about to go over. But the National Survey of Children's Health is the data that you see on the screen. It's important to note that the data on the screen is likely underreported because when we compare that to the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, we actually see that 38% of our high school students in Indiana reported they had lived with someone who is depressed, mentally ill, or suicidal. 29% of high school students reported they had lived with someone who was having a problem with alcohol or drug use. 18% of high school students reported that they have been or were currently separated from a parent or a guardian who was either in jail, prison, or a detention center. And 14% of our high school students in Indiana reported that a parent or adult in their life, most of the time or always, swore at them, insulted them, or put them down. It's important to recognize the impacts that ACEs have on our children. But I think it's equally important to recognize that in many cases, these adverse experiences are preventable. The prevention of ACEs requires a holistic and community-based approach that provides adequate resources and protection for the youth who are most vulnerable in our communities. And one of the ways to provide these resources and protection is actually through providing adequate and appropriate access to technology within the home. And we know that COVID redefined the way that we work and engage with the outside world, but it also opened up the opportunity for students to expand their learning while they were away from school. And this transition has highlighted the importance of making technology and internet access accessible and available to all of our students throughout the state. In fact, research shows that children lacking access to technology and internet will fall behind their peers. And the number of students that did not have access to a computer or internet access in Indiana decreased overall, so that's good. Indiana still falls behind the national average across every grade level. I do want to take a moment and pause and recognize the continued and sustained work that has been done in this area. I actually come from a rural community in southern Indiana, and so we have a lot of these conversations about how do we continue the expansion of internet access and broadband. And I know that there is continuous funding and efforts being done, and I think that is an incredibly important point to call attention to. In the meantime, during COVID, we know that school corporations worked to address these technology access gaps with creative and innovative solutions, which range from community partnerships, Wi-Fi hotspots, and relying on public resources like partnering with local libraries. However, this also places an increased pressure on school corporations to maintain these temporary solutions, which is why it's so promising to see sustained and continued expansion efforts of broadband throughout the state. Now here you see on the screen, a couple of things that Mark has pulled out related to the commission's strategic plan objectives as it relates to the family and community domain. So I'll pause, let you take a minute to review those and ask any questions that you might have regarding any of the data that was just presented in family and community.
So sorry, I was reading. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you. I wanted to go back and your slide on the data spotlight, access to technology. I'm under the impression that there was a problem in minority communities for kids having access to computer and internet access. It's not shown here. I mean, it's not broke down that way, but is that a fact that, or am I?
Right. It is not it is not broken down that way. The way that we have it broken down is by grade level, which is how the census breaks that down. I will say that at IYI, we are always looking for continuous ways to disaggregate our data so that we get a clearer picture of how specific populations and communities are experiencing some of the things we are talking about. So you are likely correct. The census has broken it down by grade level. I'm not sure if they have a table or data that breaks it down by grade level and race or ethnicity. So we can certainly get it probably just by race or ethnicity, but when we're talking about just children as opposed to the entire community or population as a whole, we chose grade level here to identify that children don't have that access. Hopefully that answers your question. We're looking.
Not really, but okay, thank you.
We are looking for ways. I'm not saying that you're incorrect. It's just that we don't have access to the data that is broken down where those two variables overlap.
Right, and I would note too, IY is a great resource. Of anything that you see in here, but you don't see the specific data points you're looking for, they'll certainly do the work to dig that out for you and find that. So
Absolutely.
if there's racial and ethnic breakdown, look at all this as items that we can pull further data from and get more ideas from to really inform our strategic goals in these areas.
Well, then that's the case. I would really like it broken down.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Thank you. This is not I'm starting with an assumption. So if my assumption is incorrect, correct me,
Sure.
please. When you gave the data around Hoosier children who have ACE scores and compounding ACE scores, and then the data you just shared with about the import of access to online and computers and things of that nature, my stereotype or my thought is kids that have high ACE scores probably have a low adult supervision. I could be very wrong, but my question ultimately is, if you have a child that doesn't have a lot of supervision or adults interacting with them, is it still just good to have internet access? I guess I worry that unsupervised and like internet access in and of itself is good, but a child unsupervised could compound whatever trauma that they're experiencing if they aren't supervised. So I didn't know if there was a caveat to internet access.
Right. You raise an excellent point, and this is something that as we've gone and kind of talked about the data, that question in various facets has been asked. Certainly access to technology and social media is a double-edged sword. We've seen the immense power that it has in providing, and we're going to talk about this in the health section, so hopefully that kind of addresses some of your question. We've seen the immense power that it has in providing people who don't have immediate access to, whether it's mental health counseling, telehealth services, can certainly provide those regards. But we understand that certainly, and research has shown this, it also comes with some drawbacks. So does the access to mental health and unsupervised internet access actually contribute to declined mental health or, children that have those ACE scores? I'm not sure. We don't have the data yet because actually access to internet and technology and social media is a relatively new area of data collection in terms of how our children are experiencing those things. But you raise an excellent point. Yeah. And hopefully some of the questions will be asked or answered in the health section.
Bernice, that was an excellent question and it popped a thought into my mind. In my own district, when I was working on trying to get internet for the children, I was doubling up, tripling up and quadrupling up, asking the question on their educational device, if they were provided internet, would that device be locked down? And I got
an absolute 100% assurance that it was. However, we could not control the non-education device. So I kept asking that question, if we are putting a school bus with a hub, what device has access? Only educational devices. But that was when the school controlled the internet access. So.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Anybody else have questions?
Thank you. So as we kind of touched on here, just briefly, one of the greatest examples, I think, of the importance of technology today is the role that it serves in the expansion of providing necessary healthcare to our underserved communities. Telehealth has been and will continue to be an avenue to expand these health services to children and young adults all throughout the state. We know that technology plays a crucial role in accessing services like telehealth care, and using the available technology that we have and the technology that we are expanding throughout the state to continue to expand healthcare into underserved areas is an important step in ensuring that all Hoosier children are healthy and cared for. You see on the screen here, in primary care, mental health care, and in dental care, many of our counties throughout the state shaded in dark blue. And as a result, much of our state population are underserved. So counties shaded in dark blue, a majority of the population are underserved when it comes to accessing these critical health care needs, primary care, mental health, and dental care. Now, the ratios of health providers to population throughout the state confirm that Hoosiers are experiencing a shortage in accessing necessary health care. In all three areas of care, as a state, we fall behind the national average of provider ratios. Now, it's important to note that these ratios are not child specific, but I think it does indicate the types of care and the amount of care that children have access to in the communities that they live in. These ratios also show that not only are Indiana families oftentimes facing barriers in accessing necessary health care, but that our healthcare professionals, our doctors, our nurses, our clinicians are likely overwhelmed by the demand that they're facing, as evidenced by the ratios here. Now, whether it's specialty care to address a specific concern or preventative care and routine visits, our children in the state should have sufficient access and robust care as they grow up and develop. And for parents and children living in these underserved communities, the unfortunate result is often foregoing care altogether. Of parents surveyed from 2020 to 2021, half of those who had to forego care for their child attributed the reason to simply not being able to get an appointment. 36.6% of parents indicated that cost was a primary factor in not deciding to receive care, suggesting that even if they had access to care where they lived, many of them simply couldn't afford it. Now, while not every child in Indiana currently has access to the medical care that they require for a variety of reasons, our schools should always be places of support and safe haven for not just the children to receive education, but also necessary care. And as these ratios once again show, as a state, we currently do not meet any of the recommended ratios for student support services, like counselors, social workers, psychologists, and even school nurses. These ratios show that children in Indiana schools especially do not have access to social workers and school psychologists who can provide valuable resources to our students to help them process and cope with many of the problems that our students are facing. Throughout the state, we have 4.5 times more students per psychologist than what is recommended, and 11 times more students per social worker than what is recommended. And so if children in Indiana families do not always have access to care within their communities, and they oftentimes are having trouble accessing this care in their schools, what effect must that have on their overall well-being and how they see and value their own health? And unfortunately, the healthcare needs and the shortages that we've just gone over don't stop at the physical health of children. We also see that it extends deeply into the mental health of our Hoosier kids. Now, as we just touched on, students often rely on staff within their schools when they're looking for services and support. And this remains true as schools and staff work to address the mental health of our children. In 2020, that blue line at the top, you see that 86.3% of our schools had a lead health education teacher that had received professional development on emotional and mental health within the last 2 years. Now, I think that's a statistic that should be championed and celebrated because it means that our schools recognize they need to be equipped with the resources to help our students cope with the things that they're encountering daily. Now, immediately below that blue line, you see a yellow line. That yellow line is the percentage of schools in Indiana in which teachers tried to increase efforts and student knowledge surrounding suicide prevention. 62% of Indiana schools found it necessary and important to increase efforts and knowledge surrounding suicide prevention. And so in typical data analytics fashion, I think the question then should be asked, what caused our schools to increase suicide prevention curriculum nearly 3 times over in just 6 years? Now, we know that mental health issues and poor mental health in general is not population specific. Every child, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, or income, can and may experience a variety of mental health issues. However, the data does show that certain groups, particularly our Black, our Hispanic, and our multiracial students, have poor mental health compared to that of their peers. This data on the screen now represents the number of students who felt sad or hopeless every day for 2 or more weeks. That's the clinical definition of depression. On the screen, you see 2 sets of colored bars. The yellow bars on the left show the percentage of students who reported experiencing depression, and this is disaggregated by race and ethnicity. And the blue bars on the right show the percentage of students who reported experiencing depression broken out by grade level. Across all races and ethnicities, we see that more than 1/3 of students experience depression, with elevated rates of depression, particularly among our Hispanic and our other race students. 1 out of 3 students, 7th to 12th grade throughout the state of Indiana, experience persistent sadness and hopelessness every day for at least 2 weeks, instead of being filled with optimism and hope and wonder. I think we all can agree should be prevalent in our children's lives. All of us, I think, recognize that these statistics are not simply numbers on a slide or percentages in a report. Just a second, I'll come right back to you. But instead, they represent our kids. They represent our students and our communities. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just think you need to make sure you put LGBTQ in this group.
We have an additional data set for the LGBTQ community, and I'll get right to that. Thank you. Now, for many of these students who are experiencing depression, the answer in their mind when they have untreated mental health issues is suicide. And we see the outcomes of untreated mental health in these data points surrounding suicide ideation. Over 16% of each racial and ethnic group seriously considered suicide in 2022, with pronounced rates among our other race students. Now, statewide, collectively, we see that 17.2% of our students seriously contemplated taking their own life in 2022. 17.2%. Just a few percentage points shy of 1 out of every 5 7th to 12th grade student here in Indiana who considered suicide in 2022. 12.8% of 7th to 12th graders in Indiana made a plan about how they would attempt suicide. That's just under 1 out of every 7 7th through 12th graders here in the state who actively made a plan on how they would attempt to end their life. And just as we saw racial and ethnic disparities arise in the prevalence of mental health issues, similar disparities present themselves yet again here in the suicide planning numbers. We also see that youth suicide ideation is not just a passing phase unique to one age group, but instead it extends across all grade levels. And you see this from depression, suicide ideation, and suicide planning. For each grade across the state, 11% or more of the junior, senior high school population actively made a plan to commit suicide. Now, we've highlighted the racial and ethnic disparities when it comes to mental health and suicide ideation, but there is another population that the data shows is also marginalized when it comes to these topics, and that's our LGBTQ population. Across the board, from poor mental health to depression to actually attempting suicide, LGBTQ students in Indiana more than double the rates compared to their heterosexual counterparts. 80% of gay, lesbian, or bisexual students experienced depression in 2021. 65% considered attempting suicide. And 22.5% of our gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual students actually attempted suicide. These are students with futures, with families, with promise, and with value, who attempted to kill themselves in 2021. And these are wide and deeply concerning gaps. It's clear that many of our students throughout the state of Indiana are experiencing declined mental health and suicidal thoughts. But the data is also clear that students who are Black, Hispanic, multiracial, and students who belong to the LGBTQ community are often experiencing these issues at much higher rates. As we saw at the beginning of this presentation, our health ranking is usually among our lowest performing domains. It is not this year, but it has historically been so. The data paints a bleak but sharp picture. Many Indiana children do not have access to healthcare, and they are suffering from poor mental health and untreated mental health conditions. And this far too often results in a cost that isn't counted in economic terms. It's counted through the loss of a child's possibilities, their future, and oftentimes their life. Again, I'd like to pause. I'll let you review some of the related strategic plan objectives as it ties to some of the data which is presented in the health domain.
Donato.
Go ahead, Bernice.
Quick question, Taylor. Do you mind going back to the slide where you had the ratio of medical professionals to children?
Sure. Everyone, avert your eyes if you don't like quick slide transitioning.
And I was thinking about this, the objective of early intervention and how this might tie in. So I used to be the general counsel at DOE, and I volunteer on a community health provider here in Indianapolis. So I have a local and state perspective. And if anybody from DOE wants to tell me things have changed statewide, I'm totally for it. But, oh wait, that's not the one. Where's the one with school nurses?
Yes, student support
Yes.
ratios.
Yes. So I'm not saying this is an easy fix, but as this body thinks about ways to get early intervention to children, there are so many schools, as shown here, that do not have at all, period, a school nurse. I've received a call from a mother in Lake County when I worked for DOE who had a second grader, extremely insulin dependent. So you gotta do the calculations, little kid can't do that. She was having to come from work to check her child's blood, and like that shouldn't have been. Like, she was at risk of losing her job. And our statute says schools are supposed to have school nurses. Our statutes say that, but there's no consequence if they don't. And like I said, it's not easy, but it's something that so much could be caught early if a child who's not seeing a doctor, who doesn't have access to care, can see a medical professional that they trust and that they can speak to beyond the physical, maybe what's going on in their home, et cetera. It's so important. So as we think about early interventions, to me, this is one, our statute already says it, that it's supposed to be happening. We need to work on making it happen, because I think we could do so much to protect kids with this one area. Thank you.
Really quickly too, we do have a new tool coming on board soon for schools. There was a measure that actually originated from the Children's Commission years ago about school-based Medicaid reimbursement. That currently schools are only able to seek Medicaid reimbursement for IEP related services, but it will now be any services that would be Medicaid reimbursable outside of a school will now be reimbursable within a school. So that does two things. It offers some more funding back to schools for services that they are mandated to do, getting about 2/3 of that back, but it also lifts the credibility of those support professionals, makes it easier for them to be in schools, makes it easier for schools to hire the right properly licensed people as well. So that's a tool that's coming on board, certainly not a complete fix, but we really hope that that builds that network now. And of course, we can't go too far without mentioning Senate Bill 1 and 4 and all the good things that we hope come out of those in the very near future, as well as we work at fleshing that through. But yes, this commission, Scott, spent a lot of time thinking about how we can assist with all of those efforts.
I've lost track of some of the hands. I saw the center row first.
Yeah, I just had a conversation yesterday with a young man out of Muncie who is a student who had come up with a suicide plan because of bullying and cyberbullying that he was experiencing, and he felt that there was no one who was helping him. He didn't get any support. for it. Personally, nothing happened to the individuals who were reported to the school with having cyberbullied and so I don't know if there is some way that we need to understand what is driving the suicide ideation amongst our kids. And if we need to break that down into the various categories, whether or not it's ACEs related kinds of stresses that are putting suicide in their path, whether it's something like bullying, whether it's I think we need to understand what's driving that suicide rate amongst our kids.
Yeah,
I don't think that's clear.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to continue to expand again, that root cause. I don't know that we're ever going to get down to that one root cause because it is such a layered. I was just at a meeting last week where students were talking about all the different things that they were encountering. And it did come down to a lot of things that you already mentioned: bullying, not having consistent high quality mentors that they felt comfortable going to talk to. So I think it's going to take a multifaceted approach, but I'll absolutely make a note that, we need to start getting into that root cause. And certainly if you would like data on that, as Mark said, please reach out to, I'll hand you my card and we can reach out and start working on a briefing or something that can provide a little bit more insight into what really is driving this decline in mental health, depression, and suicide ideation among our students. That's an excellent point.
I would really like to see if you do some reporting to report back to the committee, some of the suicide that you're deep diving down into.
Mm.
I think we're all very interested on that topic. And there's just no answers right now, just lots of questions. So if you would be willing to do a report and get back to the committee, I would welcome that. I think everyone else would too. So.
We can certainly figure out the logistics of how and the timing of that. Absolutely. I think it's an excellent point, and we definitely need more data and research on it. Yes.
Yeah, we definitely have IYI as a part of our data sharing and mapping committee as well. So as you think of some of these questions and data points, we'll make sure we integrate those well, because that's a report that can be generated through that group.
Okay, Dr. Weaver.
Yes, hi, thank you. So I have 2 points. The first, to address what both of you are saying. So the data around the suicidal ideation and intention actually came from the Indiana Youth Risk Behavior Survey that the Department of Health does help to do. And in that, it does get into things like bullying and reports like the percentage of students that said that they are bullied, also the ones that experience violence, whether outside of the home or in school. So we do have that extra information. And I will share that this is the first time that we got weighted data in quite some time. I don't have the number off the top of my head, 6 years.
2015
Yeah,
was the last youth risk
2015.
behavior survey.
Right. And we were just as shocked as all of you that 11% of our students actually attempted suicide in the year prior, and 22% of our LGBTQ kids did. The problem is that it does require schools to participate in that survey. And unfortunately, we know that this last year, we did not have enough schools participate. So we will not get weighted data. So we won't be able to see where we are getting worse versus where we're getting better. So in order to identify these very significant issues, we do need to encourage our schools to participate, so we know where it is that we need to focus our time, our money, and our efforts. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I have tried to get legislation passed that would require at least a sampling of the schools, and I think the governor actually tried to get all of the schools to participate. So I would love to work on it. I think this is extremely critical. I've been a real supporter of the YBRS, and I would love for us to get routine participation so that we can get on a regular basis weighted data.
Yeah,
So I would
very
love to
important
work with
stuff.
you if you have any ideas.
Absolutely, yes. And I'm sure my team would appreciate all the support. We all would. It's very important work. My second point is back to the schools. With the legislation passed this year, thank you, all the legislators in the room. All of our counties do now have the ability to opt into funding. Part of that funding would be to get a school health liaison. So it is not a school nurse in every school, but it is somebody who is paying attention to the access of healthcare and the health needs of the community to be able to help the schools that maybe don't have a school nurse to ensure the kids are getting their basic needs met. vision, hearing screening, et cetera. We are now having rolling in, how many counties have opted in? We're over 20 counties that have opted into this funding to help things like this, to get into prevention of obesity, prevention for tobacco use, school health liaison, et cetera. So we've had 20 counties opt in, but you can do the math, that's 70 plus that have not opted into that process. So just something for you guys to be aware of, that is out there and available. Thank you.
And just as a quick addendum to there are two surveys. There's the Youth Risk Behavior Survey and there's the Indiana Youth Survey. And we actually utilize data from both of those surveys to try to, they typically are done every other year. So they kind of help fill in each other's gaps. They do ask different questions, but they ask very similar questions. And so it does provide us a good metric, even when we don't meet that sampling threshold of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. A lot of times we still rely on the Indiana Youth Survey to help kind of fill in areas where we might not have that data. So we do utilize both, and they're highly important tools in understanding the experiences that our students are facing. I know we're relatively short on time, but I certainly want to allow for questions if there are any.
I thought I saw another hand and I'm sorry if, no, did you? Okay, go ahead.
Excellent, thank you. So as we talked about in the health section, we know and we see the data has shown that our students are struggling with mental health issues, they're struggling with suicide ideation. And if so much of their time is being spent figuring out how to cope and deal with these issues, as well as looking for the necessary care that requires really to help treat these issues, how much less of their time then, can we ask, is being spent on their educational futures? Things like plotting their course, dreaming of the future, and learning the foundational concepts that position our kids for success. And we see some of the core indicators that NE Casey Foundation uses within the education domain to provide these rankings. This is actually the first NE Casey Foundation education ranking that includes data after COVID. So the 2022 data utilized 2019 data. This is the first ranking that utilizes data after COVID. When we look at the differences in proficiency between pre-COVID testing and post-COVID testing, they're dramatic. From 2019 to 2022, we see a 5.7% drop in iRead proficiency by students throughout the state, and iLearn presents a similar decline, both in English language arts, with both of them hovering proficiency around 48% in 2019, but they declined by 6.7% and 8.4% respectively in 2022. These declines represent all students throughout the state. And so to get a better picture of which students are meeting proficiency standards and which ones might be struggling a little bit more, we need to once again look at this data broken out by subgroup, or that disaggregation. This time series bar chart shows the percentage of iRead proficiency that specific populations achieved in 2019, 2021, and 2022. And much like the data we saw in the health section, we see a disproportionate and elevated decline in proficiency among our Black, our Hispanic, our multiracial, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander students. Gauging iLearning English language arts proficiency, the data shows that already low percentages were made lower in 2021 and 2022. Again, specifically among our Black, Hispanic, multiracial, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander students. In 2022, 19% of Indiana's Black students demonstrated proficiency in iLearn English language arts, and that was down from 25% in 2019. Within iLearn math testing, we see yet again low proficiency scores made lower in 2022 across all populations, but exhibited to a greater degree among our racially diverse students. Hispanic students saw a decline of nearly 10% in math proficiency, and Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander students saw a 17% drop in math proficiency. And these iLearn and iRead scores suggest that many of our students are struggling to demonstrate proficiency and mastery of concepts like English language arts and math, starting as early as 3rd grade and continuing on into the 8th grade. We also know that Indiana schools are simultaneously seeing a decline in high school graduation rate and an incline in our state dropout rate. In fact, both have reached their respective low points and high points when compared to the past 10 years of data. In 2022, our statewide graduation rate hit 86.6%. And in raw numbers, this translates to 1 out of every 7 students in Indiana not graduating in 2022. And so if our students aren't sufficiently grasping concepts at a high school level, and many of them are unable to meet graduation requirements, how can we expect them to be adequately prepared for post-secondary life, whatever that looks like, for them. Specifically, when it comes to college enrollment, the favorite data adage rings true. Correlation does not always equal causation. We can't directly link the decline in high school graduation and the incline in dropout rates to the decline that we see in college enrollment throughout the state. But we also recognize that there are certainly parallels that exist between these data points. Total college enrollment in the state declined to 53.4% in 2022. And many of these specific subpopulations that you see on the left side of the screen hovered around or below 50%, with a few notable exceptions. Asian students continue to enroll in college at much higher rates, as do 21st century scholars, and those graduating with honors diplomas. We continue to see a shift in college going rates among our male and female populations, as females continue to outpace their male counterparts by enrolling in college at higher rates. We also see higher college going rates among those students who earn dual credit in high school. Now, while 21st century scholars enroll in college at a rate of 80.6%, the overall enrollment in the 21st century scholars program has been declining. And so on the left, you see a heat map of eligible students who completed enrollment in the program from the 2026 cohort, or the graduating class of 2026. And on the right, just one class later, the same data, but with significant decline from 1 year prior. And recent data shows that nearly 40% of Indiana students are eligible for some assistance to the 21st Century Scholars Program, yet only half of eligible students enroll in the program. Now, I would be remiss in not mentioning that obviously House Enrolled Act 1449 was signed into law. And so it will be very interesting to see how this data changes as that law takes effect, and what students are participating versus opting out, and if the messaging is accurately and effectively getting to those students. So we'll be very carefully watching the data as it transforms as that bill has passed. We see a similar trend present in Indiana's FAFSA filing rate. And compared to our neighboring states, our filing rate among students comes in second to last at 50.5%. And just as we see elevated college going rates among 21st century scholars statewide, we also see that 58% of scholars completed the FAFSA. In total, however, just over half of high school seniors in Indiana who graduated this year, just a couple weeks ago for many of them, completed a free application to possibly receive financial aid. And through the decline in 21st century scholars enrollment and in FAFSA filing rates, we see that historically Indiana students have left money on the table when it comes to continuing their education, whether that's a certificate, a 2-year degree, or a 4-year degree. I also know there was a bill passed that requires the eligibility of FAFSA students. Again, they are optional to opt out, so we will very carefully be watching the data as that bill progresses and really begins to take shape here in the state. An increasingly globalized, complex, and evolving workforce. I think it's the hope of every Hoosier that the current and future generation of students are prepared for whatever form the economy takes on next. And for a lot of our students, that is through college on time completion. Are they accessing and really grasping all of the academic success and things that college has to offer them? And so you see that by graduating class, we actually have seen an increase in college on-time completion up to 43.5%, which is a market improvement compared to historical trends. And we also see that data broken out by subgroup. And some of the similar patterns that we saw within iLearn and iRead and college going rates are also present here in college on-time completion. So again, pause, let you review some of these key points as it relates to education. I know a lot of work was done in the past legislative session as it pertains to education. So again, open up for any questions or give you a chance to review points here.
Anyone have any questions at this point?
Great, thank you. This is the last domain, economic well-being, and I want to be respectful of your time, so I'll move very quickly through this. We see when it comes to economic well-being, our focus this previous year in the State of the Child was on childcare within this particular domain. 1 in 10 Indiana households with children younger than 6 reported problems with childcare severe enough to have caused someone in the family to quit a job, not take a job, or greatly change their job in the past year. And the high demand of care and the insufficient supply of available spots has created an environment where many families throughout the state are forced to decide between choosing to pay for necessities or enrolling their child in a quality program. The estimated demand for early childhood care totals over 337,000 children in the state. That's children 5 years or younger, in which both parents or their only parent or guardian are in the workforce. So children under 5, when all parents or guardians are in the workforce and they need care, 337 children. Now, licensed program capacity meets a little over half of that projected demand. That's the blue bar immediately below the purple bar. And if you take that a step further, of the over 4,000 programs in the state, only about 1,600 meet high quality standards. And high quality means that they are on paths to quality 3 and 4. That's the yellow bar at the bottom. So statewide, we see that for every 4 estimated children in need of care, there are only 2 spots available to them, and only 1 of which is in a high quality program. Now, the Early Learning Access Index, or ELI for short, measures 4 factors. That's capacity, quality, affordability, and choice. And the ELI score is based on a range of 0, which is the lowest, and the highest to 100. Indiana's statewide ELI score improved from 60.6 in 2021 to 62.2 in 2022. And while we did see an increase, no counties were deemed to have sufficient and adequate access at 100% level. Despite the growing estimated demand in care, we actually saw 25 counties who saw a decline in their overall access score. And so we've talked about capacity, we've talked about quality, and as a byproduct of those two, choice that parents have to enroll their children. So let's talk about the last factor in the ELI index, which is affordability. Indiana is one of 33 states where infant care is actually more expensive than in-state public college tuition. So if we take a family of 4, for example, the average family size in Indiana, and this family has an infant and a 4-year-old, the average annual cost of center-based care for this family would be $23,709, or 23.7% of the median household income for a married couple. Again, family of 4 with both an infant and a 4-year-old. Now, throughout the pandemic, we saw out-of-school programs adapt and expand their services to meet the changing needs of our children and our families. And while these programs play a vital role in the well-being of our students, too many children are still being left out. And Indiana has actually hit an all-time high in demand for after-school programs. For every 1 child enrolled in after-school programs, 3 more are waiting for a slot to become available to them. And while parent satisfaction hits an impressive 97% overall, parents in Indiana were also more likely compared to other states to report challenges in accessing those programs. These barriers include lack of affordability, availability, safe transportation to and from, and unmet scheduling needs. Now, Child Care Aware releases their annual national rankings in terms of affordability. And this metric uses the least affordable states for care that have the highest prices relative to their specific median family income. And according to the latest report, Indiana came in at 17th for center-based before and after school care. So for a married couple making the median income, we see that center-based care accounts for 7.4% of their annual income, and family-based care accounts for 6.3%. To the far left side of the table, we see that after-school care for a single mother accounts for over 20% of her annual income, regardless of the type of care that her child is enrolled in. And so these numbers suggest that after-school care continues to be a burden for many of our married couples throughout the state and has become untenable for many single families in the state of Indiana. And lastly, again, your strategic plan objectives that Mark has outlined as it relates to economic well-being. And I will pause one final time for questions before I turn it over.
Are there any questions?
I think you're good.
Thank you
so
very much. Again,
Great
appreciate the
information.
opportunity and spending the morning with you.
Okay, moving forward to item number 5, Data Sharing and Mapping Committee.
Good morning. All right, so we're the Data Sharing and Mapping Committee for the Commission. My name is Josie Fassel. I'm the Director of Analytics Indiana, but 2.5 weeks ago was the Chief Data Strategy Officer for the Governor's Chief Equity Inclusion Opportunity Officer, Kara Herring. So I'm back, I'm here, and happy to support this amazing group of leaders that are working on a data-related product that we think will really help the Commission answer some. I used to work within the Chief Equity Inclusion Opportunity Officer just like 2.5 weeks ago, but I'm now the Director of Analytics Indiana for the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. Yeah. I'm here with my co-chair, Nikki Ford, who's the Director of Data and Analytics over at the Department of Child Services. And we have some amazing partners that work with us in the committee from Department of Education, Child Services, Management Performance Hub, who we're going to hear from today, from Tyler Brown, the Family Social Services Administration, Office of Court Services, Attorney General, Indiana Youth Institute, who you just heard from today, and again, Central Indiana Corporate Partnership from myself. And with that, yeah, sorry, is that better? There you go. And with that, I'll kick it over to Nikki, who's going to go over the data product that we would like to build together as a subcommittee.
Hello. Okay, so what we have been working on is a dashboard that will demonstrate this for the state of Indiana, those youth who are being served by different systems within our state. So you can see the 3 objectives that we have for the dashboard. To get a holistic picture of youth receiving services from the state, what's the overlap of services received by youth in Indiana, and what are the outcomes that are associated with the youth receiving the services in the state of Indiana. And then we have here the statutory definition of the vulnerable youth in our state. And then we'll toss it over to Tyler, who's been working on our dashboard so far with data. We'll begin with DCS data combined with DOE data and then move forward from there.
Thank you, Nikki and Josie, and thank you to the commission for allowing me to speak today. Can everybody hear me okay? No? Can you hear me better now? Thank you. So I'm going to give a quick outline of what we're thinking with the dashboard. Nikki kind of laid the groundwork for what we're thinking as far as research questions that the dashboard would answer. This is going to get a little bit to more of the sections that we want to do to answer those research questions. So within, we're envisioning a 3-section dashboard approach for each research question that we have. The first section will show geographically where these youth are positioned within the state. We're envisioning a heat map to show this. And then also we want to be mindful of the various disaggregations that we can make within that data. Right now we've identified race, ethnicity, gender, age, and rural urban split as disclosure will allow for certain areas of the state. The second section will answer the question around overlap of service, especially within the definition, the statutory definition of vulnerable youth. So the second section, I have an example there on the side from our counterparts in Kentucky that have developed a similar dashboard. So right now we're envisioning, and I'll get to this in my last slide, but we're going to start a phase 1 approach with the Department of Child Services and the Department of Education as a starting point. But we're really open to work with those agency subject matter experts to break down the various subgroups of need within each agency and display them here. So we can see things like overlap of these populations, specific needs that they might have, and overlap of service across the agencies. The last section will focus on the outcomes approach. Again, I've provided an example here to the right of what our counterparts in Kentucky have looked at. But this is going to look a little bit more historic. So we're going to look at a cohort of youth as defined in this first DCS DOE cohort. And we're going to look at, based on these children that we've defined within this initial phase, we're going to look at outcomes that they've achieved longitudinally. So some of them here that Kentucky have looked at is, can we look at disaggregating high school graduation rates? Can we look at how many go to college if we can access enough longitudinal data? Things along those lines. I have presented to the commission. It's been a while since I presented on this idea. It's something that I worked with the committee and with Julie Whitman at the time. This is really just to provide an update. We are underway with our phase 1 of this, which will include Department of Child Services, Department of Education. We have received funding from the U.S. Department of Education to conduct this effort and build this dashboard through a statewide longitudinal data systems grant. And we're currently on track, and we're hopeful to have a first dashboard ready for release in the fall. What we're hoping is that as we build this future phase, we can work on additional phases and bring in more chunks of the vulnerable youth definition and bring in more agencies.
Does anyone have any questions for us?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Hi, I'm Maria Fennell. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for the Family and Social Services Administration. I'm sitting in for Dan Rosiniak today. I'm a pediatrician and I am a health services researcher. That's my background. So I love data. So thank you for presenting. I'm curious, I think, as far as looking at the dashboard, I'm going to guess that many of these boxes displayed are probably like overlapping, if that makes sense. Children belonging to many of them. Will the dashboard have that capacity to sort of look in more finer, greater detail and understand if somebody's homeless, special education, so forth and so on?
Yeah, that is the aim of the dashboard, is to break down the DOE at-risk populations.
Okay. That's great. I think from sort of an actionability or sort of being able to do something, we probably would need those types of data. Thank you.
Will it include youth who are in the juvenile delinquency system, or will you be able to incorporate that at some point?
Yeah, so as a part of the statutory definition, juvenile probation is included. For phase one, we don't have it included, but it is an aim to have it in a future phase.
Can I ask a follow-up? What agencies would you work with to get that data?
The juvenile probation,
Okay.
or,
So with the Supreme
that
Court,
the-
I take it, or?
yeah, we've been working with courts.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on down to youth engagement, number 6. Stephanie?
Hello, everyone. I'm here today with Diana Owens. She is the Assistant Director of Youth Engagement for Foster Success, and she's going to help me present today on authentic youth engagement. I wanted to do this training again because we have multiple new members to the commission, and also my role ends today, and we will have 2 new youth coming in starting next meeting, or July, right? July. Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So at Foster Success, we are a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to helping teens and young people who are transitioning out of care. And we really do this by honing in on those really big impact areas, such as education, financial stability, employment. And we really hope to do this by the time that they turn 26. So at Foster Success, we have a few impact areas, and within each of those impact areas, we have different programs and services to support those young people. So I'll go through each of them and then just highlight 1 or 2 programs that have been really impactful. So with our educational success, we have a Pathways program that focuses on young people who are 14 to 17, helping them with college essays, taking them on college tours, and really helping them to have that support in areas where they may not have that adult mentor. For our youth engagement, we have our advisory board, which continues to help DCS and other areas and systems that the young people have to navigate.
our financial empowerment, which is probably, I would say, one of our best programs, which really helps to provide our young people with financial literacy. We help to build their credit, and we also do matches as well. For our health and well-being, that focuses really on our vital documents. So with a lot of our young people here, they lose or don't have access to their birth certificate, social security card, and they really lack the understanding around what they actually have access to with their insurance. And lastly, we have workforce readiness, which really helps our young people with their resumes. We do mock interviews, and then we can also support them with finding employment right away as well. So for this presentation, we're gonna be doing authentic youth engagement. So authentic youth engagement is basically young people are the experts in their own lives and should be fully engaged in decision-making that affects them, from leading their own case planning to partnering with system leaders to improve child welfare policies and practice. Authentic youth engagement builds individual leadership skills, strengthens meaningful relationships, and leads to effective solutions. So in short, this means having teens and young adults actively participating in any planning and decision making involving their own lives, while they are being treated as full partners and are involved, motivated, and excited about the issue. This can look like having a young person being involved in planning a conference and actively being included in all decisions, from what the guests will be eating to the topics that will be covered in between. So when we think of youth engagement, we really want to be intentional about it, and we ourselves also want to show up as our authentic selves as well. And we do this by having sustained involvement of those young people in the decision-making activities. And so we may think of youth involvement or youth engagement as something that isn't really like evidence-based, but it is a strength-based. And it works by focusing on preparing the young people for the different challenges that they will be facing in their adolescence and adulthood. And so we as the adults can do this by having those coordinated series of activities that they can really participate in, so that they can also become competent as well in those areas. So there are three main levels to youth engagement, which is individual / level engagement, or as we like to call it, practice level engagement. This level is focused on building the relationships and rapport between the young person and the professional, so they can actively work together on different projects to create change in an empowering and motivating way. There's peer level or peer led, which is focused on having, for example, individuals with lived experience partner with others who have lived experience on projects or being in a mentoring position. This can also look like helping their peers navigate and understand the system on a different level or from a different perspective. And then there's system level, which is focused on individuals who have lived experience, partner with systems to create and actively participate in change. This can look like having a young person be actively involved in updating or changing a policy, serving on boards or commissions like this that make decisions that will affect them or their peers. So what makes youth engagement authentic? It's the attitudes of you, of me, of us, of every adult in this room who has the opportunity to have that type of relationship and rapport with a young person. So it's all about how we step into the situation when we are actively involving a young person in the work that we're doing. So what you see right here is a diagram, and at the top that is the least authentic youth engagement, and then at the bottom is the most. So we do not want to see youth as objects. We do not want to go in and thinking that we know what is best for a young person. We don't want to control the situations that are presented to them. And we don't want them to feel like, hey, we have this great opportunity that we've developed for you, you should take it. That's not how it should be. But we also don't want youth to be just recipients of what we are putting out there. We don't want to kind of still maintain control, but make the young person feels like we are providing them with different scenarios and situations that will help them to become real people in the real world. Because honestly, that's doing them a disservice. But what we do want to do is see our young people as partners. People that we really value because they have something significant to offer because of their lived experience. And we want to continue to support them and encourage them as they go on this journey of growth. And so we want to see our young people as equals. So some benefits to authentic youth engagement. One of the big ones is the effect on adolescent brain development. We all know that the brain is not fully developed till 26, and trauma with youth can really affect that. Authentic youth engagement can help young people and professionals understand trauma and the adverse effects it can have. It can also help the young person understand why a policy is in place, which can help them learn through the experiences that they have from a different perspective and help them rewire the brain and heal. Authentic youth engagement also enhances the skills that are listed, which can help with like professional development, decision-making, and self-esteem, and much more.
You could both speak in the microphone because that line folks aren't really well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So with youth who have experienced the system, this is a great opportunity for them to practice those adult skills. Because they will be working alongside and collaborating with the supportive adult. And we know that this is especially important because the neuroscientists say that during this time, this is when our brains are developing the most. And if they don't have the right guidance and support, then in those areas, their executive functioning could be a lot lower. We also want to make sure that those that are participating in these types of civil system involved activities, that they are active participants in the decision-making process, that they are the ones that are leading others so that they can get that experience. And by doing so, what we see is that this does reduce and mitigate a lot of those feelings of powerlessness and hopelessness that they have experienced in the system. So some examples of youth adult partnerships, it could be anything from like sitting on the commission and working with you guys, or it could be as little as working together on case planning. There's all different ways that youth and adults can partner that can lead to effective change and do authentic youth engagement right. So this is done with preparation. Prep your young people. This is honestly key when working with young people. And it really helps with their growth and development. So this does require a lot of time. Like young people are really figuring it out. Us as adults, we have our routine, we have our structure, we know what works best for us. But for our young people, they're really just trying to figure out what method does this go with versus this. And so being aware of what their developmental needs are and not making those assumptions are important. So checking in with them to see, hey, what do you understand about this? Or can you tell me what you know? Also being very flexible with their schedules. They are busy just like us. Some of them have jobs, some of them have kids, some of them have family members that they're taking care of. So being flexible and kind of understanding where they are coming from will really help to continue to build that authentic relationship. And then this one is my favorite, relationship building, because I think for a lot of us as adults, when we're working with young people, we're always so set in focusing on what actually needs to get done. But taking some time back to ask them, like, what's your favorite show? What are you watching on TV? What type of music are you listening to? But also finding out what their goals and ambitions are really important to building that relationship. Efforts. is a given. Also being patient with our young people is key. That kind of ties back to that level of awareness that they may or may not have. And then I'm gonna say my favorite and key one is also young adults and adults also being open to practicing new skills. We recently just had our annual conference, and our CFO said something that really stuck with me. When a young person comes up to you and they ask you a question, instead of saying, I don't know, start saying, let's go find out together, so that they can see that, hey, I don't have this knowledge, but I'm also not afraid to go seek it out and to learn new things, and that I'm still growing as a professional as well. And then addressing attitudes and beliefs. Us as adults, we may have preconceived notions of young people, maybe not knowing all of the information, or they need step-by-step details for everything. And for the young people, they may look at the adults as, oh, they're going to give you all of the answers. But for this to really be authentic and for our young people to grow to be competent individuals, we really need to kind of get all of those attitudes and beliefs out on the table. Can you move forward? So one of the main things Foster Success does is train the young people in strategic sharing, knowing what we are comfortable sharing and also what adults shouldn't ask of us or shouldn't do, basically. So in short, this means what us as young people with lived experience are comfortable sharing that won't necessarily bring up the unwanted or negative feelings or experiences that pertains to the topics that are being discussed. It also helps the young person know how to answer or dismiss the unwanted questions. This also means that the professionals that we are working with know what is appropriate and not appropriate to ask. So for example, a few months ago, I went to an event and somebody came up to me randomly. It didn't pertain to the event. They shouldn't have asked me this, but they randomly just asked me to share my life story with them. And I didn't know how to answer that. So with having strategic sharing training, I knew how to rebunk that question and answer it appropriately how I felt comfortable answering that. So with preparations, as Stephanie had just talked about, we do strategic sharing with our young people. Because of their life experiences, we want to make sure that they feel comfortable sharing whatever they want to with the community and the people that they are engaging with. So that is something that Foster Success does provide. We also review the context of the event to strengthen the young person's understanding of what the subject matter is. We continue to support them by asking effective questions. So not necessarily the whys, because we're kind of finding out that for our young people, sometimes that can be a triggering word, but more so instilling that confidence in them and kind of seeing where their brain is at by asking, how did you get to that solution? Can you walk me through how you did this? So it puts us in the learner's chair and it puts them in the teaching chair so that we do have that exchange of power. And then for, as Stephanie just said, techniques for managing inappropriate audience questions. This doesn't even just pertain to foster youth or young people with lived experience. It could just be any question that you don't feel quite comfortable asking. We're just equipping our young people with the ability to use their voice and to navigate those types of situations. And then reviewing agendas is key so that they can really come up with any questions that they want to ask during any meetings. And then just equipping them with their mission statement or an elevator speech when they are advocating. So for opportunities. So there are many opportunities to practice authentic youth engagement appropriately, even if you necessarily don't work with youth, you can still incorporate it in your companies. So some opportunities to provide and practice authentic youth engagement is practicing and engaging with youth to build and exercise the partnerships, knowing and helping build opportunities that will align with the young person's interests and can help with meeting a goal that the young person has. And that the youth are prepared for anything that arises organically, that they have the skills necessary, that you just don't throw them in somewhere that they're not necessarily prepared for or trained in.
And so some examples of opportunities that we as adults can provide to young people are speaking engagements such as this. There's different work groups that young people can participate in. Partner to develop written materials and resources. This one touches me deeply, especially because when I first started at Foster Success, I really leaned on the young people and the alumni to help restructure our board. They provided a lot of new language that really resonated with a lot of the young people that we were trying to impact. Our social media campaigns, youth advisory boards, summer and job openings at the state and national level. So if you all know of any openings that are happening right now, this would be a great way to get those young people involved. And then learning about workshops and special advised courses in foster care.
So for support, there are multiple different ways you can support a young person with practicing authentic youth engagement. There's physical support, which is just basically being present during, before, and after an opportunity, being there for them to support them. There is emotional support, which is basically making space for their emotions. So knowing that sometimes doing different things will bring up different things, and being there for them and motivating them in different ways. And then there's also financial compensation, which is basically the professional gets paid for doing what they do. You should pay the young person also because they're bringing their lived experience into play.
So we really do challenge you all as the adults of your different organizations and programs that you are running to think of how you can integrate youth engagement within the next month, 6 months, up to a year as well. So thank you all so much for your time. Please give us feedback. We love feedback. It really helps our young people as well to kind of see what they can continue to work and grow on and what they do well.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Especially thank you, Stephanie. What an opportunity we've had with this last year to watch you grow and mature and be part of our team. I'm so grateful.
I think, Stephanie, you have an announcement for us.
Yes, we have decided and appointed the 2 new youth members, Ali Leonard, who comes from a foster care background, and then Michael Owens, who comes from a juvenile justice background. And they will be starting in July.
Are they online to say a quick hello before I appoint them? Ali's here, okay.
I guess I'll say a quick hello. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to join in July and to meet Michael.
Thank you very much, Ali, for being part of our team. You are officially appointed to the Children's Commission, and we are excited to have you. Michael, are you also online? He's not? Okay, well, Michael is appointed as well, and we look forward to working with them and learning from them both. Okay, moving on to number 7, Executive Director and Committee Updates.
Right, hard act to follow. And again, Stephanie and Dave, being our first youth members, have just done a fantastic job creating that role. And happy to have them being a part of selecting the next youth coming in as well. So very, very excited to see what comes next, but excited to be losing them in this role as well. I've said it from the beginning, but they're definitely our most important voices at this table and always will be. So all the gratitude for them. So a few things that I have that I just want to make sure to cover. This be less exciting than youth engagement, but hopefully we'll cover some of that. We have a few pretty substantial developments going on through the commission. First, I just want to give a brief report on a meeting that we had with our task force and committee chairs. This was kind of revisiting now that I'm new in the role, going back to our strategic plan, seeing what kind of supports they could use as far as developing that and walking that forward. And then also looking at how our new coordinator position that I'll get to in a second can really be supporting them more. Truly, they are the engine. We're sometimes the engineers. Sometimes we're just the ones that are at the end of that train as well, making sure it gets forward. But they create all of the goals that we move forward and all of the initiatives that we vote on and move towards. But they've got a very heavy lift there. So it was great to meet with them and see what we can be doing. So a couple of things that came out of that loud and clear is that our strategic plan is great, but we need to get a little bit more granular and some more data-based objectives built under that so they can really measure what they're doing, so they can feel that they've got something that they've created that can be measured, that accomplishment can be looked at as something that can be replicated and shared and reviewed year after year. So we're going to be doing a lot of work in that space. And a lot of why we had a database presentation to kick things off today is really making sure we're framing that correctly going forward. Also making sure that they have the logistical support they need to convene meetings, hold meetings, have agendas and meeting minutes circulated on all that stuff, fun stuff that we love, making sure their Zoom calls are all lined up and everything. We're going to be grateful to have our coordinator position helping greatly with that end of things as well. So a couple of things I'll be working on is also some onboarding tools and videos as far as the role of being a member of the task force and a committee. As well as how to properly put forth a recommendation from that level. So when things get to us, it's in that right form where we can do what we love to do best, is say, that's an awesome idea, let's move it forward. So we'll be meeting in between the months where we have the commission meetings with those chairs to really just keep on making sure they're fully supported and doing all the great work they're doing. So that'll be a regular standing meeting that we'll be setting up shortly. Some of the more exciting stuff I have to say is thanks largely to our legislative members and Representative Devon in particular. We do have now a budget line in the state budget. So the commission has been greatly supported through the Supreme Court and the Office of Court Services, where we're still going to remain physically housed and receiving still quite a bit of support, I'm sure. But now that we have a standalone budget, there's a few things we're going to be able to do that we have been looking forward to for a long time. So a few key highlights in the budget that we've put forward is going to be, right now we have a paid internship for MSW students. We'll be expanding that to have a second MSW intern and increasing our capacity there. We're also looking at, on the topic of youth engagement, we had a lot of awesome youth apply for the slots on the commission to be commission members. And we really gave a lot of thought to what can we be doing with these youth that went through the process. But because of surely the limitation of the slots that we have available, we're not able to place them. So we will be looking at doing similar placements at the task force and committee level. And again, to one of the points in Stephanie's presentation, making sure that they receive the meeting compensation that the members receive that are members of this full commission as well. So giving them that full respect and making sure that we've got those voices every layer of the commission, with us, our role being strictly about the welfare of Indiana's children. We need to make sure we have their voices represented wherever we possibly can. So we have so far one, maybe two that'll be joining on the task force and committee level. So we put in some funding to make sure that's properly reimbursed as well. So after that, of course, we have my position will be in that as a portion of it, and the new coordinator position as well. So a lot of good things. We do have it also being supplemented by another item that you'll see on the agenda here. Casey Family Programs has given us a grant of $55,000 for youth and family engagement. So within our budget, we'll be embedding that as something that'll help do our fall youth and family engagement summit. And we're adding into that beyond being able to pay for some good keynote speakers and things like that. And it will be a virtual event to make sure it's accessible to our youth and families across the entire state. Sometimes we get a little addicted to loving to have things in person, but it's hard for people to make the trek down here for something that really should be of service to them, right? Something else we're embedding that though is a set of stipends for youth and family members to help plan that event. Again, making sure the youth and family are embedded in everything we do and properly compensate when they're coming in to be a professional resource with their experience to take on those roles. So we're very, very excited to be doing that. Again, trying to embed all the great things that were just presented as deeply into the commission as we possibly can. The big item on the agenda that I get to announce that everybody's drum roll waiting for is the new coordinator position. I will point out that we went through a very comprehensive process here. We've been looking at this for a long time. Again, by having the budget items we do now, we have the funding available to add a second staff person. They'll be doing so much to make sure that we're more present in more places, that the commission is known in all the right places, interacting in all the right places, and supporting everybody that we can possibly support. We had close to 50 applications for it, a lot of tremendous advocates for the youth of our state. Can't emphasize that enough. And anybody who's listening that was part of that process, we welcome you to join into the commission and our task force and committees as well. Reach out to me directly on that. And we don't want to lose any good youth advocates that would like to find a voice here. So after those applications, we brought in 2 rounds of interviews, worked through those with support from the Indiana Office of Court Services, some other members of the commission as well. I'm happy to announce that our final selection was made official about 5 o'clock yesterday. And we have selected Blaine Cook, our current intern, who's been with us for a year, to be the new coordinator for the commission. So very excited to have him. Just a few things. He's a recent MSW graduate, has been working with us again for almost a year in one of our paid internship positions. And I can say every single person that's worked with him emphasized just how hardworking was, that he was the epitome of the consummate team player, and that his passion for this work is without a doubt at the level that we would want it to be at, and maybe even beyond that. So he really cares about getting this work done, getting the commission to that next level. And between adding him, adding more youth and family engagement pieces, adding that next intern, pressure's on for us to do a lot of great things in the next year. But now we have a lot of the tools needed to do that. So thanks to the budgetary support, thanks for Blaine for applying for the position, and for all of you for your different ways in supporting all the work we've done ahead. So much, much more to come there.
Okay, great. Well, welcome officially, Blaine. We're glad to have you on board. Looking forward to good things in the future out of you, as well as everything you've done in the past year. We appreciate all the work you've done. So I wanted to ask you, is Dejana online that we could give her a shout out and see that beautiful new boy? Dejana, can you turn your camera on for a second?
Yes. Discharged yesterday, and my heart rate and blood pressure kept going up, so they just keeping me for some extra monitoring, but I would be more than happy. You guys helped me. I was just about to go outside and just take me a little walk real quick, but I would be more than happy. He's a beautiful baby.
We also want to thank you for all the hard work you did this past year. Thank you so much. I know you pitched it with me when we were selecting the director. Just really appreciate what you've brought to the committee.
And I appreciate that so much. Okay, so hi y'all. And then I'll show y'all. When can you see me clearly? Where's my reception? Can you guys see him okay?
You're there.
He's like, aw. Name is Davier. He was a big boy. He was born at 8 pounds and 4 ounces, and he was 20 inches and a half. 20 and a half inches. Yeah. Thank you, though. Thank you.
What a beautiful boy. I enjoy watching you grow in your new role as mother. Okay, the last thing we have is future discussion meeting topics.
So the only big item we have on there is, and as Justice David mentioned, the Youth Justice Oversight Committee finishing up its work and getting that final report done. Since that did originate in part through the Children's Commission, we do want to have them come back and offer a full briefing on the report at the next meeting. So you can see I have suggested we might need extended time at that meeting because we do want to make sure we're fully briefed on that. That will also include a discussion on what is the next role of the commission going to be as we're looking at going from idea to implementation on the YJOC report. So I put a tentative on the calendar that we might do a 9 to noon if that. Yeah, and certainly if we want to, yeah. So we'll note, we have a detractor on the 9 to noon concept. Happy to look at other ways we can do that too, if we need to go and looking at going a half hour later, et cetera. Some of that will be decided once we get some dry runs in as far as how long it takes for that report to get discussed. If they feel they can do it in our traditional time, or if we need to really pad the meeting with some extra room.
Thank you. Thank you for that insight. We'll take a look at that in the executive meeting then in next month. With that, anyone have any questions or comments? Again, thank you, Stephanie and Dejana, for serving. That we are so grateful to have you. And it's going to be hard to let you go, but I'm sure the 2 new ones are going to be great as well. So with that, meeting is adjourned. Right. 15 minutes early.